at the end of the day, like Soot's basically the first consumer grade vector database with purpose-built GUI on top of it, right? And so I think why we're spending so much time focusing on building all these pipelines for adding data into Soot is, today, if you want to build a vector database and navigate it of your own data, it's really, really hard to do so. And so we just want it to feel like, at the end of the day, like a copy paste operation almost, that we want people to almost forget that they're interacting with like literally the most advanced kind of AI tooling under the hood, and just kind of get in the habit of seeing their data this way. Almost something that we've heard from a few people who've been using the tool regularly is like they actually can't imagine interacting with their computers in any other way.
Welcome to Sorcery. I'm Molly O'Shea, founder of Sorcery, a weekly top VC deals newsletter highlighting the top GPs, founders, and deal announcements leading the next innovation cycle. Today, we have Soot CEO Jake Harper, CTO Amol Kapoor, and Kobie Fuller, GP at Upfront Ventures. Soot recently announced their $7.2 million seed round led by Upfront Ventures, and we will dive into it all. For context, Soot is the next evolution of the file system, a spatial, self-organizing canvas for self-expression and discovery. I do have a little bit of bias because I did work on this deal at Upfront, but nevertheless, it's a great conversation and I think you'll enjoy. Hi, Kobie, Jake, and Amol. It's great to have you on.
What's going on? Good to see you.
Hey, Molly, it's great to see you.
Well, I've never had 3 people on before, so this is like super complex. I guess just to start, so you guys just announced your $7.2 million raise led by Upfront Ventures. Kobie, would love to start with you. So how did you gain conviction in Soot, and what was your investment strategy there?
Yeah, sometimes you just see a product and you sit back and you're like, oh my God, what the hell is that? It just kind of just hits you in a manner that is just so exciting and infectious, and you just can't stop using it, playing around with it. And when, honestly, Molly, you sent me a Slack message, and I hopped on and looked at a demo site, I was just blown away. And then I had a conversation with Jake and Amol, and I was like, wow, like the founders behind this also mind-blowing, partially because it's very rare where you see within 2 co-founders, like one incredibly left brain, one incredibly right brain, and it like just works. And you'll get to see Jake and Amol talk today. They complement each other so well. And for me, that just made it such an exciting investment to make. On top of which, it culminated in me creating an investment framework that was inspired by Soot called Fabric, where for me, Fabric stands for fast, addictive, bold, rewarding, integrated, and built on community. And what you're going to see today in Soot, it's all those pieces in a beautiful product that I think is fundamentally going to change the way we interact with digital assets, media, and file systems. So yeah, that was a lot of what inspired me to do this deal.
Incredible and great way to introduce it all. Jake, over to you. So what is Soot?
Well, before explaining that, also just want to say, like, we wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you, Molly, sending the seeing the first potential in us, that first meeting, and then sending it over to Kobie, and Kobie really leaning in. It's funny, a lot of investors that we've worked with say, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and do everything I can to help you guys. And I don't know if Kobie really wants me to say this on the air, but he means it. It's been such an incredible opportunity for us to get the chance to work with you. So thank you both, because without y'all, I would be probably working at Amazon or something, allowing us to continue building this thing. So yeah, I think to talk about what Soot is, we really think of it as an evolution of the file system. That word file system can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So to kind of like unpack that, because in one sense, a file system is like a finder. It's how you navigate the files that you own on your computer. But also when you think about the file system as a piece of kind of like a fundamental architecture of how we interact with digital information, there's so many manifestations of the file system that we use every day that we might not necessarily think of as such. If you're scrolling through Instagram or you're reading the New York Times, if you're shopping on an e-commerce platform. These are all kind of ways of interacting with data that are, the kind of like core experience of that, of navigating through information in this kind of hierarchical, linear manner, is really, the DNA of those experiences is because they're all kind of based on the file system. And so we see Soot as being an evolution of that experience. So there's a lot of different, it's kind of like these very simple building blocks, or I should say core building blocks are not necessarily so simple, but they can be purposed for many different kinds of applications. And kind of at its core, we see this as like some of the core features of Soot are that it is spatial. So it displays your information in this three-dimensional space that's projected onto your screen. It's self-organizing. And so unlike a traditional file system where you have to manually create these linear hierarchies, or you might have an algorithm that allows you to sort things in one dimension. In Finder, it's alphabetical order. In Google, it's by ranking things based on relevance to a query. But Soot allows you to organize information multidimensionally and automatically. That's because it uses vector embeddings as kind of the foundation of how we build these visualizations. And when you combine those two things together, a beautiful spatial interface that's super fast, that's self-organizing, and that allows you to interact with lots and lots of different types of content really quickly. The result is something that's kind of equally powerful as like an internal hard drive, as it is, an external facing experience. Like, a product launch, you want to create a product page really quickly, and you have 10,000 assets, and you can just deploy all of those in a single click. So, just going back to the answer to your question, we see it as a file system, but we also see the word file system as being something that is really huge and has potential to touch almost any way that we interact with digital information today.
Yeah, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, beauty's an interesting one. I feel like it's, we hear a lot this expression, form follows function, but the form, it's a way of kind of, and often it's presented as a trade-off. It's like, do we care more about form or do we care more about functionality? I think that, when this phrase was originally introduced, it was meant to convey that like the way that an object is instantiated in the world is a direct cause of the function that it's been given, right? So a Ferrari has its beautiful curves to make it aerodynamic because it's supposed to be super fast. Well, that begs the question then, like, why is the Ferrari red, right? Like, what does its redness have to do with its speed? And underlying something's functionality is its essence, right? Like, what is the reason that this object exists in the world? And for us, I think that the core of why we're building Soot and the core of why we think people use technology and tools in the first place, yes, it's the functionality and it's the things that it can make more efficient in your life, but it's also about how it makes you feel. It's the emotion that it gives you. You can think of that emotion as having a life cycle. And we really want, when somebody sees their information in this beautiful self-organized cloud, we want them to feel empowered and inspired. We want it to be kind of a refreshing experience, unlike kind of the way that the way that people interact with digital tools today has soured a little bit. When you open a social media, for example, there's so much beautiful visual creative content there, but also the experience of navigating a feed isn't one that I think most people would say feels empowering or inspiring.
You don't think Salesforce is sexy? Salesforce is not sexy? That's sexy.
There are certain people that feel real good navigating Salesforce.
Count me out. I'm out.
Color is amazing. Oh my god!
I mean, it could be empowering in its own way. If you're an expert, like
I'd rather have the Ferrari. I don't know.
But yeah, so that's kind of how we think about the value of beauty when it comes to a product like this.
Yeah, that's super helpful, and also a unique perspective. As to Kobie's point, we're very limited to a reduced technology UX, and that's kind of become a standard and everyone copies it, but you guys actually took the other route and you did something completely different and you reimagined what a file system could even look like. It's more creative, it's dynamic, it's spatial, you can move it around. So before we get too deep into the technology, I do want to cover the team. Jake, if you want to cover your background really quick, and then we'll go to Amol, and then you can share more about the overall team. Would love to go over that.
Yeah, so before Soot, I was a machine learning researcher at... Oh, wait, no, that's Amol. I'm sorry. I get it confused. Just kidding. So my background actually is as an artist, but immediately before Soot, I was the senior sound director at Zoops. So my job was basically to figure out how should these robots, these self-driving cars that have no human behind the wheel, how should they communicate to pedestrians? And from there, kind of made the leap over to here for reasons that we could talk about later. About 8 or 9 months into playing around with dimensionality reduction techniques and data visualization algorithms and things like that, UMAP and TSNE and all these like fun things that during the pandemic and just like playing around with like seeing data and these kind of self-organizing clouds. Really, my strategy for doing all of that was so that I could reach out to Amol and send him something that would do two things. One is give him enough grounding to say, okay, actually, this is a serious idea that, and for him to really kind of emotionally feel that it is solving the kind of problem that's claiming it would solve. But the second one is so that Amol would have the emotion of like, yeah, but also like this is so built that I have to just come in and fix it. And that's actually exactly what happened. And Amol was at Google Research at the time. And I'll let you, Amol, talk about your background a little bit.
A serious approach to solving the problem, and also a serious person behind solving the problem. The way we first met was actually kind of interesting. To kind of build on that a little bit, like Jake did send me a really crappy demo, but honestly, like I think Jake doesn't do enough to give himself credit. Like for somebody who is coming from a non-technical background, like taking the time to actually set that up and get something out that was actually like a good approximation of what was in his head is not something that I think is easy to do. And it definitely gave me a lot of confidence in him as a partner. So my background is I started actually doing AI research. Funny enough, I got very lucky. I started doing it like 10 years ago, mostly as like just kind of was interested in it. My background before that was actually in molecular biology, and I was really interested in connectomics, which is the study of putting brain circuitry on silicon. So I was kind of already in the space. I was doing some research there, and I got really interested in deep learning right around like 2014. And lo and behold, that just became like, that was the wave, right? Like that was the thing that I ended up writing. So I got really interested in deep learning pretty early on. I joined Google Research for about 3.5 years. While I was there, I worked on a whole bunch of different stuff, working on like taking 2D images of historical cities and turning them to 3D models for VR. Did a lot of work with graph mining and graph learning, where some of my work ended up in Google Images and Google Maps, and I did a little bit of like COVID detection work. You could take a look at my Google Scholar page if you want. I think my favorite project during that time period was I was working with the robotics teams to see if we could teach robot dogs how to walk using YouTube videos of dogs walking. The answer is no. We did not get very far in that project, but it was really, really fun to work on. But I spent a lot of time thinking during that time frame. Did Kobie really like that one?
I didn't know you did that. I'm very curious. How did these robot dogs actually walk? Were they just like super?
They weren't very good at it. They would fall all over the place. I got really interested in this concept of representation learning, which is basically this idea that you can take anything in the world, whether it's a concept or an emotion like happiness, or something as physical like a piece of furniture, like a table. You can take all of these things and convert them into vector representations that allow them to be then compared. You can add them and subtract them and average them and do all these really interesting things. And to me, that's actually the crux of Soot, and it's something I was really interested in. And Jake just happened to kind of hit me at exactly the right time, where I was like, oh shit, this is like something that's perfectly timed. I think a lot of people are not necessarily thinking about ML in this way. And I think we can really run with this and build something that's super fucking cool for tons and tons of people. So that's kind of my background, and that's kind of how I landed up here 3.5 years ago. It's been a really exciting journey since.
What about the rest of the team? How'd you find them all?
Yeah, so I could start with the engineering team, and then Jake, maybe you can pick up from there. A lot of the engineering team is actually just folks I know and really good friends of mine, people who I've known for a long amount of time. In particular, Hunter, who's our tech lead, he was actually sitting next to me when I was at Google Research. So we were like the only two 20-something people on this floor of like PhDs, like comp sci PhDs. and quickly discovered that we had a lot of like very similar, very nerdy hobbies. And so we became very fast friends. And he's been somebody I've been, I was talking to about Soot for years. And he joined maybe like a year and a half ago and has been our tech lead ever since, and has been championing some of our most amazing tech. Jake likes to say, and I think this is true actually, Hunter was one of the youngest people ever hired by Google. He went there straight after high school. So just an incredibly talented engineer. And then the rest of the engineering team, we have, Ganesh, who's an old friend of mine from college who I've worked with for over a decade now. And he was actually with me on some of those early AI projects. And Noah, who's been spearheading a lot of our front-end engineering, who's ex-Meta and just like a super, super talented creative coder. And then, Jake, if you want to talk about the rest of the team.
Yeah, also really important for us. I think, so much of what we're building is, meant to be really kind of closely built with our community in mind, and especially people in visual creative culture, who kind of comprise a lot of our early users. And so one of our first hires was a head of community, who's a curator that actually used to show with, who's based in the west coast of Ireland, and really killer design team. They go by Too Much. They're based in London, but they're pretty, as closely integrated as you could possibly be with Soot. We also recently brought on Alan Schaefer, who was the head of digital at Telfar. He's the only person I know who's actually, I probably can't say the number, but quarterback product releases where you're selling a lot of things and selling out in a very short amount of time, like mind-boggling amount of product.
Great. Okay, so before we go too far, I think it's very important to get the visual aspect of this. If either of you want to take the reins and provide us a demo and show us through what Soot is and the power of Soot, that would be really helpful. And just if you could voice over what you're doing so people who aren't watching the video could kind of follow, that would be helpful.
Yes, what we're looking at right now is, it's very simple. It's my hard drive. Specifically, it's our Figma hard drive. So this is all the design assets across our product design and branding. And something that you notice is that while it may look chaotic to some, it's actually very organized. So you have a lot of different so for example, we were pushing out a lot of content to Instagram this week. So here's a lot of the different posts that we were making, or tests for some of the posts. All of our logos and branding stuff related to that is over here. Different UI screenshots on this side. It's a bit trippy to be seeing Soot and Soot. But something that's really nice about this is it's really flexible, right? So that's an example of kind of a hard drive in Soot. But also I'm really into Air Jordans. And so this is actually something that we're about to release, which is a live feed to Goat, which is one of the best places to get Air Jordans today. They have basically every single one. And it's the same concept applied to shopping for shoes. So it's about 5,000 Air Jordans here, in this case, organized by color. I can say, blue, really simple searches by color, or you can do some more advanced searches. In this case, show me every single Air Jordan by similarity to this. And, of course, it doesn't matter unless you can actually take an action with that data. So we're able to also just link directly to product feeds, and basically as a content exploration tool to get you connected to what makes this particular content valuable. And what's really cool is you can kind of mix all this together. So I never have to really separate all of my my work and my interests in terms of all the things that I'm visually connected to and stimulated by. It all just lives together in this one feed. So in the same place, I could say, Soot logo, and it immediately comes up, or Black Air Jordans, et cetera, et cetera. Another thing I'll mention, and this is a brand new thing as of today, but we have an integration with Figma. So once my hard drive comes up, I can click on an asset. Let's see, it'll be really cool to show. Yeah, which is the logo. It's pretty straightforward. And if I hit page URL, it just takes me straight to the Figma file. So something that's really interesting is Figma actually today announced that they're releasing visual search within the tool. But something that happens so often for us is across our different teams, somebody will say like, oh, I just need to grab a logo to throw in a deck, or I just need to grab, XYZ thing, or I want to check in on the latest of design for something else. And it's just impossible to go like flying through Figma and trying to figure out which part of a board that a particular asset is on. And so here we find it just a lot faster to just, describe visually what you're looking for. I remember seeing this poster the other day that one of my crew made, and like I just couldn't tell you where it lived, but it's so beautiful. We were working on browsers not supported notification, and it's just so much easier to find it here and be transported to the project where that lives. So yeah, that's kind of like the foundation of how the application functions. But one of the really cool things about building a kind of like visual universe like this of all of your content is not just about kind of sharing this and collaborating with internal teams, but it's also a really valuable way to publish and share content externally. So we were looking at the Air Jordan GOAT site, but I'll show you what that looks like published. So basically in the tool, there's a publish button, and when you hit that, it sends it out to a link that even non-users can access. And why this becomes really useful is it means that if you build this really great experience of your data in Soot, you can actually distribute that to your audiences outside of Soot. So in the case of building an e-commerce site, like we were actually able to stand up this fully functioning product discovery tool, and it took about like 10 minutes from start to finish to get all the content in here, get the metadata linked, and get it published. But it also works for something as simple as like a team hard drive. In this case, Dr. Me, who's a design studio based in Manchester, they use Soot as basically their portfolio website, so that when clients come to them and they're like, oh, I'm looking for a poster design, or I want to see, like a record cover that you made, it just becomes really easy for them to share and distribute lots and lots more content than ever before with their audience. It's even cool for things like museums. This is the archive of the Isamu Noguchi Museum. So as you can see, it's like, what does a hard drive that you're publicly sharing, a museum, and an e-commerce site all have in common? Well, it's like these foundational building blocks of being able to rapidly and intuitively and beautifully organize visual information and share it as fast as possible. So yeah, that's kind of like the foundations of the tool.
And it's good to get those different perspectives too. Kobie, when we were diligencing this, you were really hands-on in testing the product out, and you had tested it out personally. I think you used it with Miles and Milan. I think you also sent it out to some of your friends in the commerce world. Could you just share more about that and how you kind of wanted to stress test the product in different angles, and what you kind of learned through all of that with the interface that we just saw?
Yeah, totally. So interesting, because obviously my personal perspective is only one data point, though I take it very seriously. The thing was like, okay, let me see what people I trust, especially in the design world, were to think of this. So one individual I sent this over to was, now Chief Design Officer at Jordan Brand, Jason Maiden, where he has a very critical eye with regards to things like this. And he immediately got it, being able to look at images from a more spatial orientation versus a linear structure where objects are just buried away in file folder structures. It's just naturally not how our brains work. So being able to see everything laid out in front of you in the manner that Jake showed a bunch of Air Jordans made logical sense. Or with regards to my wife's business, Miles Milan, she posts a ton of pictures on Instagram, and there's a lot of content there. So I told Jake and Amol, like, hey, let's see how Miles Milan's overall Instagram feed looks visualized within Soot. And she saw it. She's like, oh, wow, this is like really cool. But what was interesting was that she happened to be working on a pitch deck for a very important project she was working on that same week. And she realized, oh, wait a minute, like this is the perfect UI for me to go in and grab images that I want to put in that deck, rather than trying to scour through my hard drive or look on Google for a net new image of a baby doing something. It's like, I've already done all this work curating images for the last couple of years. It's already gone through my filter, but the element of trying to rediscover all that was just a mess through going through Instagram and going through Soot and searching for kid reading outside. Boom, you get 15 images that are beautifully laid out in a manner where she can easily pick the one she wants. It just streamlined her process for creating that overall product. And so I can go on for days with regards to the ways in which people emotionally reacted to what they were seeing, to the point where not only were they excited to use the product, but a number of these same individuals were also excited to invest in the company because they saw it as the future by which they're going to be discovering and working with files.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Amol, I know that this might look beautiful and very simple, but it's super complex, and maybe you're banging your head because it might have hurt along the way to get this far. But I want to talk the technical aspects about Soot because it is complex, and you do have an AI ML background. It's not an LLM wrapper, and it's not even close. So could you share more about this and what the technical aspects are of Soot?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's actually like a couple of really big problems that we kind of had to discover and had to solve all at once, which is kind of the crux of like why this is such an interesting project. And one aspect of it is definitely the AI ML side, which I think is super worth spending some time on. But even beyond that, there was some like really fascinating and really tricky technical problems around like how do you make things at the scale that we're working at? You know, we're loading like thousands of images on a mobile browser without crashing those devices, and in fact, they're just humming along. How do you make that happen? We had to solve some really, really interesting collaboration problems because when you're working with an AI in the loop, you know, AI timelines are really slow. And so you can't like lock down the consumer's tool while they're using it. You know, you have to find a way to make that collaborative. So there are some really interesting technical problems that we ended up running into. On the ML side, one of the things that actually is really funny to me is like I've been in the ML world now, like I said, for almost a decade. And I just hear more and more people just being like, everything is LLMs. Like this is an LLM and that is an LLM. I even had somebody ask me like, what LLM is powering Soot? And I was just kind of like, that's not even close to the right question to ask. Like I said, I'm really fascinated about representation learning. And so under the hood, what we're doing is we're constantly thinking about how can we take this data and put it in the best vector space that we possibly can get. We're powering this all with like a joint image text embedding space that we have running across like a pretty sizable fleet at this point, so that when images come in, they automatically get embedded into this vector space, and then they can interact with each other, and suddenly they can talk to each other. And you can do that for all sorts of different modalities. So we have this figured out for video, we have this figured out for GIFs, we have this figured out for images and text, and so on and so forth. And it's really exciting. Like that underlying technology is actually what makes LLMs powerful. I think a lot of people don't even realize that. That like actually what matters for these ML models is how good are these representations and how do you get them into the state where they can talk to each other. One of the things that's really exciting for me about Soot is we actually strip away the chatbot interface, right? Like you don't have to get at this underlying insight, and the only way you can do it is through like 240 characters of text or whatever. Like you actually are giving users a direct view into how these ML models think and collaborating with them very directly through the underlying vector spaces and embedding spaces. So that's kind of on the ML side. I'm happy to kind of answer more questions there because I know that's probably where a lot of people are super hyped up about that. But there's just like so many things to talk about on the technical side that I can also do.
Well, I think it's one of the things I found interesting was like I thought you and I were starting an AI company together, and in some ways like we sort of have, but the hardest problems by far have been around graphics.
Yeah, 100%. Well, so, it's interesting. Like one of the things that I feel like I came into the company with a very strong opinion about was the role of like training our own ML models. And in particular, I've very strongly held to the idea that like, building out really, really expensive, really like kind of hard to compete with ML models is actually kind of silly. Like that's something that I think a lot of other companies are in this rat race for. And not only are they not going to win, it's not even like useful for their end users. Whereas the approach that we've taken from the beginning has been really focused on build our infrastructure in such a way that we can adapt to the latest and greatest ML tooling, build our infrastructure in such a way that as things get better in the ML world, we automatically get that for free. And then we just build integrations and we just like, give our users the ability to interact with all of that stuff as soon as it becomes available. So a great example of that is like, the way that we have ML generative tools directly plugged in. But yeah, I think the graphics side has like been a fascinating area of exploration. So like I said, we're kind of loading tens of thousands of images on screen in seconds. And I'm like, I can actually even share my screen really quick, just kind of like emphasize that. Like, I don't think, like Jake showed this already, but I think it's worth even just kind of briefly
to
bringing
be
back.
fair, also the versions of the tool that we have deployed in that's user facing is actually not the state of the art, which you're about to show.
Right. Yeah, this is actually like I was actually going to show like a slightly older version of the tool, but like like if you just refresh the page, the whole thing kind of comes online in something like 3 to 5 seconds, and there it is. And like all of those images, this is like 15,000 images that have just loaded in this browser, even while we're talking. I think that like there was a lot of really really difficult technical stuff that we had to do here. A lot of it was related to compression. So it's basically how do you create?
Amol, hit the 3D button just because it is a cool.
Yeah. We all have like I think everybody has like their own favorite parts of like these different tools, and like the 3D view is like really really fucking cool, honestly. But like so under the hood, we're just super deep in the technical stack around eking out every bit of juice that we can from OpenGL and WebGL in order to get these all to render. We're taking a lot of inspiration from video games here, actually. So, the video game industry has been one that has been having to deal with this magnitude of data load and these kinds of loading constraints for a really long time. So we're learning a lot of lessons from there about how do we do compression, how do we load this many assets at the same time. And at the same time, in the back end, we are doing a ton of compression. We're on the kind of like the latest and greatest in terms of like image compression, as well as, how do we streamline different, how do we stream in different like resolutions of things without users knowing. I think there's a lot of magic that's happening here that I'm not necessarily going to dive all the way into, but there's a lot of tricks and things that make it look seamless so that a user doesn't even notice that, for example, like when they click on something, that image just loaded instantly, and that's, I think, one of the more powerful things that we've kind of really invested a lot of time in is keeping that magical feeling for the end user.
I think like when as Amol said earlier, training your own model is really expensive. As you said, the benefit to users is not necessarily substantial, right? Because it's like there's going to be an open source model that comes around, let's say in 2 months or 6 months or 9 months, like it's inevitable, and you've just spent all of your resources training the model that's now obsolete, not super cash efficient. In addition, if we really just we're laser focused on getting pixels to your screen as beautifully, as accessibly, and as fast as possible, we felt pretty confident that was like everything that happens before that can be plug and play and modular and extensible. But if we just like really own that piece of the tech stack, it meant that the product that we would have would always kind of feel magical, and the kind of nuts and bolts would evolve with the rest of the industry, but the kind of like end user experience would still be this kind of beautiful thing that would be untouchable by others.
To kind of double down on this, because this is an investing show, who are your target customer profiles? Like, who's going to be using this and paying for it?
We've basically been building for the last 18 months. We're just now starting to roll the tool out in the public. We have a small cohort of people who have kind of been like our alpha testers, using this as their personal hard drive on a daily basis. And then we've been working with some brands, some kind of like leading people in visual creative culture, design studios and the like, to help us kind of hone in on the kind of publishing side of the tool. And what we'll start to see over the next 3 to 4 months is a lot more of these projects seeing the light of day. So one of the first ones to have been announced is our collaboration with Dazed. Dazed is they are one of the leading voices in visual creative culture, and so it started as Dazed and Confused, UK-based magazine, and so we're working on finding ways to republish their content archive, for example. And on the other side of the spectrum is fashion houses and brands. So people like Revolve, who are using it both internally or will be using it internally as a design tool, and also externally to power shopping experiences. And the Revolve shop will be coming online very soon.
So exciting. Back to you, Amol. Okay, I want to know, are there any upcoming features or developments that you're working on? Like, what's next?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that I think has actually been so fascinating about Soot is there's just so many directions that we can go in once we have the underlying technology in. And some of the things that we've recently brought online were things like being able to add metadata tags and like being able to search based on those metadata tags and all that stuff. I think one of the things that we're really excited now moving forward into the next maybe like let's say quarter is we have this core infrastructure, this infrastructure for this file system, and now we just want to make it possible for people to dump as much stuff into it as possible. So we're really excited about exploring integrations with Arena and Figma, with Finder, and a bunch of other different places where users have their data already stored. We think that we can get to the point where people can just, and I know Kobie, this is like one of your favorite features, just like Control A, Control C on any website, and then Control V into Soot, and it just works. And we've had that be really, really a powerful way of getting people excited about the tool. Some of the other features that I'm really excited about, we're bringing on more tooling to support a wider range of file types. So for a really long time, we've kind of really only supported images, even though we kind of had the underlying insight for how to support other things like text and video. We're bringing video online to public consumers. I'm really excited about that. It's going to be something where you can upload a video and see it in concert with all of the images that are already in your space, and be able to search on it and interact with it and add metadata to it the same way that you can do with everything else. And then looking a little bit farther ahead, I think that we have a couple of really, really great. We have this editor mode that that Jake's mentioned has been we've been trialing with a bunch of consumers, and showed a little bit of that here. Moving a little bit farther ahead, we're really excited to bring that editor mode to a bunch of different places. So, I'd love to, we're talking about how we can build out a mobile version of that so that people can kind of see and edit and add to on the fly. We've been talking about, creating a little Chrome extension or little browser extension that lives with you wherever you go. So that's whenever you want to add something to Soot, you can just click a button, it's right there. And you can just see all of these things in concert no matter where you are. So I think there's a lot of really exciting things that are happening, and honestly, it's just hard to pick a favorite. There's a lot of really cool stuff. I think I'm pretty excited about what's coming up.
Kind of underlying that is, at the end of the day, Soot's basically the first consumer grade vector database with purpose-built GUI on top of it, right? And so I think why we're spending so much time focusing on building all these pipelines for adding data into Soot is, today, if you want to build a vector database and navigate it of your own data, it's really, really hard to do so. And so we just want it to feel at the end of the day, like a copy paste operation almost, that we want people to almost forget that they're interacting with literally the most advanced kind of AI tooling under the hood, and just kind of get in the habit of seeing their data this way. Almost something that we've heard from a few people who've been using the tool regularly is they actually can't imagine interacting with their computers in any other way, which is something that I find really surprising. One of them was an artist, and she said that she was doing a portfolio review and uses Soot to share her work. And she said that when she thinks about her work now, she thinks about it in this cloud and sees all of the connections around it, and that's just become the new normal for her. And we want to make that experience accessible to as many people as possible. And so the fastest way to kind of expand the demographic of people who can get value from Soot immediately is by targeting all these different places where people's data exists and making it as easy as possible to drag it over into the tool.
I think the one thing that was interesting that Jake said for the first time, I think a few weeks ago to me, was this analogy around a rainforest, which I guess actually initially says was like a rainforest, but I had no idea what the hell this guy's talking about. So it's like a rainforest. And okay, I have no idea what that means. But the way he then described what that truly meant was when you go into a rainforest, and I'm probably butchering exactly how Jake would describe this because I've never actually been in a rainforest, but the overall sense of overwhelming sensations and stimuli from both visually and auditory is it's just you're taking in so many different pieces of input. And then he contrasted that relative to going on Google and doing a search and only seeing 10 search results, half of which are probably paid anyway, but in this linear fashion. But behind that search, there are a million plus results that are potentially there. But why am I seeing all those results in this linear fashion that I got to scroll through and eventually find what I'm looking for. So to be able to take essentially something that people don't even realize they could benefit from, i.e. a vector database, and visualize all information in a spatial manner, I don't have to like constantly looking for what's the number one search result. Like the number 30th search result that is visually laid out in this like spatial kind of blob that then my eye goes to, because like over here is what I want, not like the dead center of the bullseye, because sometimes like computers aren't very intelligent around knowing what we truly want, or we're not really good at truly expressing what we truly want.
Yep.
And we have to see it to understand like that's what I'm actually looking for. And that's the beauty of what they've done, is being able to allow us to be more instinctual and natural with regards to objects that we want to actually interact with and choose. And that's what I think is really beautiful about what they've done in terms of totally rethinking the way we actually should interact with computers.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting and early design experiment was, because as you kind of referenced the rainforest, one of the fundamental laws of nature is self-organization. All complex networks are self-organizing. It's kind of like organization is an emergent property of complexity, surprisingly. And because of the self-organization, it allows an ecosystem like the rainforest to be not only just completely saturated, it's just so much more stimuli, as Kobie said, but also that stimuli is accessible. In other words, it's not like it's the rainforest. The experience of the rainforest is this cacophony of noise. It's more like an orchestra. You can hear all the different layers, and it's really accessible to understand how all the information fits together. It turns out machine learning is really good at self-organization. But to the point about search, one of the kind of these an early design experiment we did was thinking about like, okay, what is the shape of this search result in a tool like this? And we kind of aligned on this kind of like spiral kind of shape, because what we realized was that like ambience, like if you can actually harness the power of the ambient space on a screen, the corners of your eye, it actually becomes vastly more efficient for seeing your search goal. And as we know, like kind of searching is such an iterative process, right? You search for something, you see what comes back, and then you iterate on that. And so being able to harness ambience and actually bring things out of a list turned out to get much, much faster search results. And the result now is, I think if we've done a bunch of head-to-head comparisons with Google Drive, and it's about 20x, if we were to look at the kind of the mean like search time. And another metric that, and it's not entirely because of using this kind of spiral, but the upper lower quartile is something like 20 seconds is like the upper quartile, and with traditional file systems, that number is actually like can be really, really high. It can be in the hours, depending on the use case. So anyways, that's something that we found really, really interesting. But it's kind of like, when you think about design as being this like kind of high performance design, is kind of like how we see this discipline. And so a lot of the stuff that makes it look and feel really unique are also kind of driven by just trying to be really meticulous with metrics and performance.
And one of the things that I think is actually worth emphasizing here is like the design is also very much in service of the technological aspects of the tool. One of the things that I think about a lot is like, if Google, when you do a Google search, you only see like 3 links and then you have to scroll. That means that Google has to spend a ton of time making sure that those top 3 links are as perfect as possible. And as a result, they end up driving down towards the lowest common denominator. Like most people, have pretty niche needs, and they're like searching along pretty niche things, and they get back whatever is the thing that's like, averaged across everybody. What's amazing about Soot, and in particular design language of Soot, is that we can focus, instead of being really, really focused on just like what the top 3 accuracy is, we can be focused on the breadth of the network, and we can show that network to everybody. And we don't have to be tied down to, only the number one, like most minute thing is the most important one, because it's just not true. Like that's just not how most people think about the world.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that's a great place to end. You all kind of orchestrated your own way to close it out. It started with rainforests and it ended with that. So I think that was awesome. It was a pleasure to have you all on.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Molly. It's always great.